We're really proud to have Errol from Wonga share his story with us. And if you don't know about Wonga, it's really a disruptor in the finance space in the UK, a household brand, lots of press attention, great growth, one of the biggest online brands in the UK. And we're really proud to have Errol today sharing this story with us. So if you don't mind coming up on stage and helping me out, because obviously you know much more about the story than I do. Hey everybody, it's great to be here, and thank you to all of you. Thanks for the invitation, first of all. But
Yeah, and just huge congratulations to Saul and Reshma and Robin and all the everybody here who kind of conceived of this years ago, and from a very small start, it's become an institution already. So congratulations. I think it's been one of the core parts of kind of what's changed as much as it has in London in the last 5-10 years. Today there's just such a different ecosystem for Europe really, but in London in particular, and I think that's just something that we didn't have 10 years ago, and it's brilliant to see this, this facility is part of that, and I think Seedcamp was a massive catalyst for all of that. So I'm going to run through today, not a lot about Wonga actually, but just stuff about making things happen, and some of the lessons we've learned along the way. But I'll try to run through this fairly quickly, and then just shout if there are any questions and thoughts, and we can have a conversation after that. The first thing I would say is, in my view, we've got to aim big and we've got to think big, and people sprout that all the time. But I think what we need to realize is that we've only got a few goes at this thing, right? We don't have 20 or 30 startups in us. So even people who start these things and try it again, and this is my third time, you don't have that many in you. And I would just challenge everybody here to think to yourself and just be really honest with yourself about whether this thing is big enough that you'd be happy if you've only got 2 or 3 goes at this thing ever, and that's what you're going to do. And maybe just put up maybe a show of hands at the moment, just if you're really reflective for a moment and think about it. Of the people that are here, some of the Seedcamp companies, who here thinks your company it can be kind of moderately successful or really huge? Who thinks moderate? Where's the investment committee? Look away.
Be honest.
Honest with yourselves. It can be huge. And huge isn't just money, right? Huge is, to my mind, it's about impact, it's about meaning, it's about whatever it is that you're doing in your space. But I would say if it's much easier to fish in a big pond. It's much easier to play in a space that is big and that's growing than to play in a contracting or a small space. And it's almost the same effort. In fact, it is the same effort. Just the satisfaction that one gets from growing something significant is massive. And I would just challenge everybody here, just in your own way, to think and reflect, and where possible, just go for the big white space. One of the principles that we work on at Wonga, and it's worked well for us, and we continue to do it as we roll out with new products, is that we're not big believers in this idea of pivoting. So, I think what one has to do is you test, and you test, and you test, and you test until you get product market fit. And that doesn't mean to pivot. I mean, if you need to pivot in the meantime, you need to pivot because you had the wrong idea to start with. That's fine. Set up a thesis, define experiments, and quite as scientifically as humanly possible, try and figure out how to get that product market fit. When that happens, you'll know it. In B2B businesses and B2C businesses, you experience it in different ways with different degrees of intensity. But the way we operate is that we test and we experiment and we learn. But then as soon as we get that connection, we double down and we double down and we double down and we double down, and we get massive focus. So in the case of Wonga, we got that fit pretty quickly. We were lucky. as soon as we got it, we doubled down and we went to TV fast, and then we doubled TV and doubled it the next month and doubled it again, and we doubled it, and then we did buses and we doubled that and we doubled that and we doubled that, and we're doing it again in new countries and in new products. And what I would say is one of the lessons we've learned is it's not just about testing and experimenting, it's not just about pivoting, it's about finding the time and the place to do each of those things. And there is a time and a place and a life cycle to do that. But if you're constantly pivoting, you're getting nowhere. You know, that's the reality of it. Something else to keep in mind early on is the concept of scalability. And I think most people here are product people and tech people, and so we tend to bias our thinking towards scalability of technology. And scalability of technology is relevant, right? So when we thought about doing 300 loans a month, we didn't know quite how we were going to do it, and now we're doing 300,000 loans a month, and clearly one has to build technology platforms that can scale, but you can't build that. It doesn't make any sense to literally build the tech on day one, but it does make a hell of a lot of sense to think about the architecture, because we've had to rebuild our systems 3 times. I mean, people have to rebuild systems either because they make conscious choices to shortcut or to hard code because it's quicker and more practical, and there's some 80-20 there that's really important. But try to the best of your abilities to build the infrastructure that is as plug and play as possible as you scale. But the stuff that's more relevant on scalability to me is scaling the rest of the organization. And what we don't think of early on enough is what else we need to build organizationally, culturally, people-wise, to be able to execute the vision. And again, it's part of the idea of testing and then getting market fit and then kind of doubling down, is at the point that you get product market fit. I'm a big believer in investing in scale. So investing in different parts of a finance organization that you'll need to have control on your numbers, even though they're not adding value on day one commercially, or adding people in product that might be a luxury early on, but because you meet somebody amazing and I'm a big believer in building that scale, and there are trade-offs with doing that. There are no free lunches in this thing. But try and build scale. Think about media. Think about the rest of a business other than just product and customer. That's at the core of getting that product market fit. As soon as you get that, I'm a strong believer that you need to then invest in the rest of the scale of an organization. The other thing that feels clear to me, and I'm a big believer in macro trends. I think you've got to go with trends. You've got to work with it. So, it's great if you can pick up a trend before anyone else picks it up, but it's actually not the most critical thing. So, for example, today it feels obvious to me that what people sometimes call the developing world, the BRIC countries, some of the high growth markets, there's massive growth compared to the more traditional economy. So bet on that. Mobile is massive. It's not just in the last 2 years, but for the last decade. Bet on mobile. Social is just, they're themes that run through where we're moving as a society, and I'm a big believer in betting on the obvious. And if you lose the Wonga example, we bet on mobile from day one, on immediacy, on reputational, on social. So we've been measuring net promoter scores as a method of trying to understand how those viral loops work since the very first loan we ever made, because there were these trends that were obvious. I mean, this isn't about future gazing so much. It's just being clear about what's obvious, and as much, to whatever extent possible, just bet on the inevitable. It's easier to work with the wind behind you than running into it. So because we're in an environment where most of our businesses here are tech related, this feels kind of obvious to make tech the core of a business, but I'm not so much talking about the business, the product here, as the business itself. For an ecosystem that generally believes in technology, too often we build businesses with manual processes behind the scenes. So with poor customer service that's not technically oriented and automated. It's just use technology for the same reason that big corporates are using technology. We need to use technology in these businesses to make it efficient, right? We need to make our customer services operations 10x more efficient than Amazon. Like, that's hard. You definitely can't do that manually. So, do accounting. There's no point doing accounting and then doing the work 3 times because it's being done on a spreadsheet and has to get emailed to. Wherever you can in the business, just use technology, because that's our bias. We've got an advantage in that space. People who are building web businesses and B2B businesses that are technical, have got an advantage over most businesses that get created. And so use that technology and use it throughout the business, not just in the product that you're building. We're huge believers in data at Wonga. I mean, we crunch thousands of pieces of data for every application, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not what I'm talking about here when I say be a data junkie. Data is one of those global trends, right? There's massive amounts of data being created, and we've got the computing processing power now to be able to make use of that data in ways that people couldn't a decade ago. So what I would say is, wherever possible in your businesses, try to figure out how to use data. We use data as much in marketing as we do in risk. In Wonga's case, people talk about it all the time on the risk side. But we use data all over the place. We use data in customer services and who we direct what traffic to. And we use data that we're very, very precisely and scientifically in terms of how we do our marketing and manage that operation. It's just about using data. And in almost every business, there is a much greater opportunity to use data today than there ever was. And we're going up against big spaces. If you're trying to create big businesses in big white spaces, you have to do something special. And using technology and using data throughout the business is absolutely fundamental to it. So, we could talk for hours about building a great team. And one of the most fortunate experiences I've had is building the team that we've built at Wonga and watching people that we've brought into the business, bring new people into the business. You cannot underestimate building a great team. It is very complex. What I would say is it starts with knowing yourself, though. And we all have strengths and weaknesses and quirks and we're idiosyncratic in many ways. It's about being really reflective and understanding who we are. Because if you're choosing co-founders, if you're choosing key employees to bring on, I would stress needing to find complementary people who can fill you out. Too often, we see startups where people are clones almost of each other. And while we're all different in some ways, we clone experiences and come out of the same schools and the same courses. Generally, that's the last thing you're looking for, in my view. If there's 2 engineers starting a business, you don't need to hire 4 more engineers right away. Just what I would stress is just build diversity. I'm a big believer in diversity. Geographically, culturally, nationally, at Wonga, just in London, we've got 46 nationalities in the business. And that's quite conscious. It's conscious in the sense that we started a business in London, which is probably the most global city in the world. And we started here because we like that. So we've built, and especially for consumer businesses, I would really kind of encourage you to think about this is a core strength. Building diversity means you're starting to understand your customer. And you're understanding it inside. And you're building values that reflect the values of your customers. And again, it's a personal bias of mine, but I'm very much in favor of diversity. And I'd say that's where it starts from. But building a great team means being opportunistic. There have been cases where we found an online business that was unfortunately going out of business, and we swooped in and took their whole tech team in one go. And there are times when I would just encourage you to be really opportunistic and really thoughtful, but everything almost is about building the team. Once you've got a great team, things start happening. People who are opportunistic and people who are looking to change things make all the difference. There's a point that you get to quite early on where you can't do everything anymore. You can't be the nexus of every decision. And at that point, it's all about the people you've put around you. So, nothing more important. We can talk about some of the other things we've learned along the way around teams, but I can't speak more about how important it really is. There isn't enough spoken about how to compensate and reward teams, and it's also really critical. And I think, if I was going to think about one core concept here to leave with you, it's about trying to figure out how to make your team shareholders in your business. So the big companies and the big corporates that you're going to be competing with at some point, right, all have what people call the agency problem, where people have got certain interests as managers and they're not necessarily aligned with shareholder interests. We've got the opportunity here where we're building small teams that are agile and to build it out of people that really share a certain set of values. And to my mind, it's hiring people that want to be shareholders in a business. They want to walk in the morning and feel like there's something extra to play for. There's something, they're going to leave a night and they're going to be thinking about it on the tube, and they're going to be thinking about it when they're going to sleep. And that's what we need, because we need to obsess about this stuff. We're not going to build businesses here that are special from nothing and compete with monsters if we're not doing something special. And that all comes back to that. And what I would say here, to my mind, it's about paying well. It's about being generous on the equity side. I would challenge people to think quite creatively about equity, and there's no one answer for this thing, but it's not obvious to me that the way equity packages work traditionally necessarily works. Should people just get 4-year vested equity, for example, they don't cross the finish line, and 7 years later, a core team of people have been working on something for 7 years. Somebody was half vested after 2 years. They left 5 years before things happened. The company may still have been in testing and experimenting mode. Other people put in the blood, sweat, and tears, and the person, because they came in early, gets a very disproportionate amount of equity to somebody who would have come on 2 years later and really done 5 years of the really commercially relevant work. And so I would there's no right answers. We can talk about, there are a lot of different ideas, and people use these ideas differently. But it's such an important part of building a great team, and building a great team is everything. And so it's great to be working on products and doing the mentoring stuff here on that, but really talking to people who have got experience building teams and the pros and cons and dealing with kind of scaling teams, nothing more important than that. One of the parts of scale that we don't always think about is sharing information. So, we've added over 100 engineers this year at Wonga. That's a real challenge. To on-ramp that number of engineers and get people productive relatively quickly is a massive challenge. When you're starting with a small team of people who know each other and can almost second guess what they're thinking about things, and they communicate, with jargon, and it's really hard to bring on a meaningful number of new people at the same time. The reality is that if you're successful, that's what's going to happen. You're going to need to do that at some point. And so what I would say is invest in wikis and in other technologies and in ways of sharing information, whatever they might be. There are lots of ways of doing it. But share information and institutionalize it as soon as possible. We didn't do it early enough, and most people don't do it early enough. And it's one thing I'd leave with you is just share knowledge, not just on the tech side.
What do you use, Errol?
We use a bunch of different tools. We use different tools on tech, and we use a bunch of different tools. So on the culture side, we'll try and speed up a bit, because again, here's one of those things that you can talk about forever. But to me, there's no obviously a right culture and a wrong culture. And I think too often in this ecosystem, we get there's a TechCrunch way of seeing the world. There's almost like a blueprint for culture. The culture, to my mind, is about authenticity. It's about trying to figure out what makes you tick. What do you want to do? What mark do you want to leave on the world? How do you want to do it? And that's about what comes naturally and what comes authentically to you. And I would just challenge you all to think about what comes to you naturally, and to have a degree of confidence in that, and to build an organization in your mold, because that's what authenticity is. And if you think about the great businesses that have been built and the great tech companies that have been built, they're authentic and they're different. Dell and Microsoft and Google and Apple, are completely different environments. All successful, just very, very different. And I think they're different because their founders were true to themselves. And so that's, beyond all the theory of culture, I think that kind of being confident enough about and clear enough about yourself, about what you want to do in the world, is a core to culture. So you'll have got a lot of advice, I'm sure, while you're here, and you'll still be getting about investors, and there's a lot to be spoken about, and you can get 5 minutes with Robin, you'll probably get more value than anything else you can do here, on the investor side at least. But I think what I would say on that is, again, just be aligned. Be really clear about what you're trying to build. Be really honest with yourself about whether it's going to be huge, whether it could be huge, whether it's probably going to be moderate, is it going to be a long build, might it be quick? There are very different investors that are great at different phases for different kinds of businesses. And getting the wrong fit is anywhere from a bad idea to a disaster, and for all sides. And so trying to get that right fit and being really honest early on is great. And what I would say is generally take little money until you've got that product market fit, because until then you really don't know. So keep yourself as flexible as possible until you get that fit, and when you need the funding to double down and keep doubling down, that's a much more realistic time to actually have a real sense of what scale is likely to be. And there are lots of different kinds of investors for different kinds of situations, and that's all I would say again, is just be clear and honest with yourself. Something that people don't do enough early on, in my view, is building brands. And I was very lucky and fortunate at Wonga in that we landed up spending a lot of time with Robin and people who focus very much on brands early on. And I think it's a massively missed opportunity, quite frankly. Brands are how your customers think about you. It's how other people think about you. And if you're playing in a big white space, people don't know that you exist. You have to make people aware that you exist, and then you need to clarify what it is that you want people to think about you. And so building brand is massive. I mean, we've done it in our particular way, and you can see here some of the examples. We use a lot of TV, we do football sponsorships, we do buses if you see them driving around this week again. We build brand through social, we build brand through interacting on Twitter and on Facebook, and we have a site called Open Wonga where we engage with critics of our business and non-critics and customers, and we have a very open conversation that we've never seen another financial services business do. All of that are ways of building brands. For us, building brands isn't about advertising. Advertising is one way of telling your story, but about figuring out how you want people to think about you is absolutely critical. So, I think different founders have different personalities, obviously. And again, one's got to find find your own mojo and find what moves you. For me, I live in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction, really. And so, constantly wanting more and constantly not being happy with what you got is a trait that I've seen across a lot of founders. It's not the only trait. You can be happy-go-lucky and also be a great founder. But I think, to my mind, kind of a sense of trying to get to perfection and knowing when to release and get on with things, but then focusing on the detail and trying to push the boundaries and not being satisfied is a core part of it. And that's part of the culture, because those are the kind of values that you just need to know about yourself. And if that's important, which is important to me, building a team of people who reflect that kind of behavior. And there's been books written about working 4 hours a week or something like that. You know what? You can have the best idea in the world. You can have all the macro trends working for you. You can get your product market fit quickly. You're going to work like a dog. And if you're not prepared to do that, this kind of gig isn't the right kind of gig. There are lots of other things to do in the world, but one should be clear about it. I think there aren't shortcuts on this stuff. You can be smart. You can use knowledge sharing. You can use different technologies like Skype to talk to people when you're not at the office. There are lots of tools to make life slightly easier and slightly better and more productive. There's no substitute to a lot of really hard work. And I think in terms of choosing founders and building the team around you, that kind of culture of being willing and happy to do hard work is, if you don't have that, I just challenge anyone to be successful. So, what I would say is a topic that I haven't heard spoken about in these kind of conversations before is you've got to stay healthy, right? So if you want to work hard and keep putting energy into things and do it year in and year out, if you want to be there to finish the marathon, because these things all are marathons, you've got to stay healthy. So what I would say is, in your own ways, just through what you eat and what you exercise, and just focus on that, because it's easy to let go. You raise money at Seedcamp, you think you're going to build the next Apple, you stop kind of living in the physical world for a few years, but it catches up with you, right? And at least for me, it's just staying in shape to some extent, or just doing exercise and eating and just managing yourself is something people don't talk about enough, but you need to do that at the same time somehow. And then finally, I'm just going to end off here, and then hopefully we've got a little bit of time for some thoughts from you guys. But it's really important also to give back to the ecosystem. This ecosystem, as I said earlier, didn't hardly exist 10 years ago. There were individuals founding companies. People knew each other, but there wasn't the ability to talk to Brent or see Saul or find Rob. They didn't exist in a coherent way. That ecosystem only exists because people give a lot to it. And what I would encourage you to do is just give back. Come back and mentor and do stuff and give back, and eventually do angel investing and do whatever it takes to give back. So today, there are two things I just want to share with you guys, two announcements that we haven't made previously that I just want to share with you in light of the ecosystem. But the first thing is that at Wonga, we are going to be supporting a number of computer science master's students at Imperial College going forward from next year. So we're going to be sponsoring a scholarship worth £10,000 each for a number of computer science graduates, and we're solving it. They'll get to earn it. They're going to solve a computer science problem, which is a pretty interesting problem that our teams posed, and we're looking to do that. And as part of that, it's part of giving back, because there's been a lot of talk about the difficulties of student loans and paying. There's been very little attention paid to graduate students, and if we want London to be a real tech hub, we need undergraduate students, we need people coding in schools, we also need master's students, because the companies that we're building here, if we want them to be world class, we need the master's students and PhD students and other people that an ecosystem absolutely has to have. They've been forgotten in a lot of the conversation. So we're making the little bit of contribution that we can make to start funding some of those scholarships. And what we're going to be doing to tie it back to schools, and we think coding in schools is super important, is that the recipients of the scholarships are going to need to commit to teaching coding back in schools. And so we're trying to create an ecosystem here, not just help through a number of individuals in a year, but to help start creating an ecosystem that is wheeled and they're, through Code Club and Code Academy and a bunch of really brilliant initiatives, that's starting, and we want to do our little bit to do that. So that's the first thing we're going to be doing as an example in the ecosystem. The second thing we're going to be doing is for this week's Seedcamp winners, we're going to be helping to provide some interest-free bridge funding between term sheet and closing of the round, so people don't have to pull back from operations, avoid hiring or whatever else. So we're going to be stepping in and helping with £10,000, to do that from our Wonga for Business product. So we launched a product for small businesses a couple of months ago that's going really nicely, and we're going to come in here just as part of the ecosystem and try and help it out. Thank you. Great. So listen, guys, that's the end of a couple of thoughts, and very happy to take some questions. I don't know what our time limit is. I've got some time.
You spoke about being data junkies at Wonga. Can you give an example how, outside of risk, you've used data to help make decisions or validate decisions?
So, without going into too much detail, unfortunately, we use it in marketing a lot. So, we don't do any of those adverts without gathering data first. So when we look at marketing, we test it, we gather data, and then we double down in the same way as we do with product. We do with marketing. We use enormous amounts of data to do that, and we build econometric models and other tools we use to predict and be able to make rational decisions around how we do that. We use data, in customer services where we have escalation queues, and we look at particular words that are being used, and we direct them in particular ways to get better service for people in particular situations. So we try and use data just wherever we possibly are, and it cuts across the business. So a lot of it becomes cultural, right? So we've built a culture where to get things done, people are expected to have rational, data-driven reasons for why that makes sense. So as we're allocating resources every day, the way we allocate resource is data-driven. It's about why we're doing this as opposed to that. And there's a time and a place for intuition, and we use intuition sometimes, and we try to trust our instincts occasionally, but our strong bias is towards data. So I don't think you can be a data business on your product side and not really in the way you operate. So we tend to, and I think once you embed it in your culture, then it sticks, because that's how people start thinking about the world.
When you're growing real fast and scaling as you are, and you're hiring 100 people per year plus, how do you spot the best talent when it's on different fronts? For example, you said engineers, but when you scale to other countries, let's say on the sales part or something, how you, as a founder, as a leader, onboard the best people? How's that process going?
Yeah, so the first thing is to prioritize it. So I spend a third of my...
Just repeat the question.
Sorry, sorry, Rob. The question was, when you're scaling it and recruiting hundreds of people a year, how as a founder do you make sure that the quality is right and you keep attracting the right talent? So it's a great question, and there's no easy answers to it. Personally, I think a lot of it's about allocation of priorities. So I spend a third of my time on recruitment. That's what I do. So I do. We've built a recruitment function in-house. So we're big believers in doing core activities in-house. For me, recruitment and talent is absolutely core. We use outside.
You don't delegate at all the recruitment?
No, we do, but I spend personally a lot of time on it, and then other senior managers spend significant amounts of their time equally recruiting. So it's a real cost. Growing quickly has a cost. There are other companies that have grown very differently. I mean, there are companies in the tech ecosystem that have grown much faster than Wonga by people. And we try and keep the numbers as manageable as possible and try and stay really focused on quality. And we've been very fortunate. We've had very low turnover. We've done generally quite well at it. And a lot of it is about setting the culture right and getting the first group of the first 20, 30 people right. Because they start recruiting for you, right? And they're the people that are meeting people first, and they don't want to work with second-rate people. And that when people come in, they get to meet them, and it sets expectations. So we do tests in some parts of the business. We do quite thorough interviewing. We get people to prepare presentations. So we use techniques, but that help us validate what people are saying. But a lot of it is also trusting what we think about it. I mean, and
to follow up on this, if you would put the Wonga thinking in two adjectives for the people that you are looking to hire, what would that be?
Very smart, very hardworking, very committed, and very cool people. Like if we don't want to spend time with people, like if I don't want to have dinner with them by themselves, like we don't want to hire them either. And so we've got a cohesive culture of people that are engaged. They argue with each other from time to time because they genuinely believe in we should do different things or in different product strategies, and that's excellent. Like we want that kind of creative tension, but we hire very cool people, and we don't compromise on that.
Why did you start Wonga? I'm assuming you were in need of a short-term loan. So why did you start the company?
Because back in 2005, 2006, it was a very different. We were in a different stage from a credit perspective. There was way too much credit in the market at that stage when we were thinking about Wonga. There were credit cards under everyone's door all day long, etc., etc. But what was clear then was that customers were getting a raw deal. So if you looked at the bank overdraft and what people were paying for bank overdrafts and what credit cards were doing, getting people into long-term debt, etc., etc., customers were getting a raw deal that had been forgotten about by the banks and by the institutions decades ago. And so you were looking at an industry that was massive. It had a huge impact on people's lives. It hadn't evolved, and I looked at it and thought, that industry colliding with digital was just a really cool opportunity to give customers and consumers just a much better set of choices that were genuinely digital and that were communicated much more clearly, delivered much more seamlessly, and with technology and data at the base of it. And so it was just really exciting to get to think about a space that was so meaningful for so many people and where one could do so much of a better job. So
just to follow up on that, so how did you validate the idea in the first place? How did you know it was going to work?
We didn't. We didn't. I share kind of some of the beliefs like Steve Jobs used to say, which is like market research has only some validity somewhere, right? If you're iterating a product, I think there's a time and a place for it, and we do some research. There are times when you go, listen, here's a macro trend. I think there's a huge opportunity here. There wasn't a product where people got money within 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that they could do off their iPhone. I thought it would be popular if it was there.
Teams?
Yeah. On your stage, what was your main challenge? early stage?
Yeah, probably that it's our particular ecosystem is really complex. So financial services is regulated. You have to deal with, infrastructure that is old. It's not primed for doing things digitally. So the data sources, the payment mechanisms, the regulatory frameworks, they just work. None of those elements were built with very little short-term loans that could be delivered instantly on a mobile phone. Just that weren't contemplated. That idea wasn't contemplated when they were created. And so we had to repurpose all of that infrastructure to deliver something that for the customer was a pleasure to use.
What I found interesting is you used the term macro trends. I believe that macro trends, they shape the future, so we can ride them, as you were saying. So it's not really a question. But I'd like you to expand more on how that was relevant to Wonga. Did you see a macro trend as a way of disrupting the existing ecosystem, or like the power forces in that ecosystem? You saw it evolving in a certain way. You said, this is great of actually disrupting the existing players who are living perhaps in a different macro era, so to speak, a different conception of what the macro forces were.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a good question came across, but.
No, it did. I think it did. So I think in the case of Wonga, we looked at mobile very early on. It was clear to me that it's still clear. I mean, I think we're all walking around with computers in our hands today. And it's obvious. It was kind of obvious 5 years ago also. So it's not that we're geniuses. We just kind of saw what was there, and it was kind of, you could draw the line. So investing in mobile early was important to us. Investing in social is important. We've got well over 100,000 fans on Facebook. Banks don't do that. They'll hire an agency to do a campaign, to do something because somebody's got a bonus or something. But we've done it because we believe in it. We do customer service on Facebook because our customers want to do customer service on Facebook. So people want to write to us on Facebook. It's not that convenient because it's all public, and we don't always want to do our customer service work in public, but we do because that's where. So it's just understanding where customers want to deal with you, where that's going, and I think the world's becoming more open and more social, and so we engage in that way. But one of the trends that we picked up early was that I think that there's a social change. There's more cynicism. There's less willingness from the kind of Facebook generation to be willing to be taken advantage of. People expect to know what they're paying for, what they're getting in return, and there's something in that ecosystem which banks haven't responded to. Banks, in the UK, still deal with people as though they don't understand, as though they're not part of the conversation. So if you look at an overdraft late fee, which is the main alternative to Wonga, you just fall into an overdraft late fee. Most people don't know. If I ask people here in the UK what overdraft late fees were, I'm sure almost nobody. Is anyone here knows what their overdraft late fees are at their bank? But there are billions and billions of pounds of overdraft late fees a year. So it's not a small thing. It's a massive amount of money, and most people are just not aware of it. I think as a macro trend that the Facebook generation, people who have grown up with Amazon and with Google, have an expectation of a degree of service that banks aren't built to service and offer, and they expect a degree of straightforward communication that is very different to the getting a 70-page glossy book in the mail at home 7 weeks after you opened your account and nobody ever reads. But regulatory-wise, they got over it, and the marketing guys glossed it up a little bit, and no one reads that. So that was a macro trend that behaviorally impacted on us massively.
Hi. First of all, thanks for a great masterclass. It's been informative and inspirational. So thank you. My question is a bit complicated, so I hope I articulate it correctly. Okay, both you and Dave today spoke about the importance of building a brand. Dave mentioned that maybe that's what you should do first. And then you spoke about product market fit and how important it is to find product market fit before you go and accelerate and speed up. In your experience at Wonga, did you like make brand a priority first before product? And additionally, as your product, as you iterated through products, was there a mismatch between brand and product? And how did you, what bent? Like, did you bend brand or did you bend product to fit? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So I think we wanted to build a brand from day one. So before we built the product, we knew that one of the things we wanted to do was build a brand because people hadn't built a brand a fresh brand in consumer finance in the UK for a long time, and we felt like it was part of what was missing here was being really clear with people about how they thought about us. And so building a brand was always going to be important. It wasn't something that we retrofitted onto a product. The product and the brand to our mind made sense. We built a brand that was young and clear and honest. So there was lots of white space on our pages, and that helped define the clarity. We talk in very simple language. We don't use jargon on our site in any way or on our apps. We just the way our product expresses itself and the brand values around what we call straight talking money, straightforward, clear, it hasn't really changed. The format of the advertising's changed as we've evolved and hopefully got a bit better at things and had more resource to invest in it and taken more time over it. But the core kind of brand values and the way the product expresses itself haven't changed much at all. We've done far more innovation at Wonga on the back end. And it's all about the scaling the organization and scaling the product. Is almost all the effort we've made over the last few years has been directed at that, at building an experience that delivers what that brand promise looks like.
I mean, just one thing on this, Dave, and I'm sorry I missed your talk this afternoon, but at Seedcamp London we did a masterclass on branding, and I think to Errol's point, a lot of people mistake branding for advertising and communications, and it's really, I think, what Errol said, it's about values. And I actually think a good screening mechanism for potential investors is to have a slide that has your values on it. 99% of investors will laugh at you because you have that slide there, because they're more interested in your metrics and your market and your hiring plan. But I think investors who can relate to the fact that you actually are building your business based on a set of values will have a very good insight into how to help you scale. So, I mean, don't be afraid of having values, because I think that's what builds sustainable, great businesses like
Completely, and I'll just go even further. When you talk internally, like when there are 5 of you in a room, you don't need to explicitly talk about your values because you probably know each other already, and you get that eating pizza. When you get the next 100 people on board, if you haven't made that explicit, if you can't communicate that, internally you have massive dissonance and massive challenges creating cohesion. So I think that absolutely fits externally, and internally it will help a ton also.
Basically, how did you raise your first round of funding without actually doing some core research and identifying the problem that is really wide, basically?
Times were easier then, huh? Times were easier.
Stupid investors.
There's an anonymous question on our team chat. Why do you have the old wrinkly man as your mascot?
There were 2 women also.
But
They were
that
wrinkly
seems
too,
like
they were
Did you ask Philip? So there was a question on the internal team chat why Wonga uses the old man with the wrinkles on their ads.
Yeah. No, it's just creative. It's just fun.
It's obviously memorable.
Yeah.
In respect of your the opportunities, you're now looking to expand internationally to other geographies. Secondly, from retail, you're moving into SME lending as well. So where do you see that development? And on the flip side, you have, of course, more regulation, FSA, clampdown, etc., etc. Where do you see that threat versus that opportunity?
Yeah, so I think any business that scales, that becomes relevant and important to lots of people, you suddenly find yourself in the spotlight in a different way, and you need to be prepared to live with that. And I think that certainly goes for financial services, but quite frankly, Google lives with a lot of regulatory concerns and in the spotlight, as does Facebook, as does Twitter, and a lot of other companies. It's what happens when you get relevant that you need to start thinking about that stuff, and that's just what happens. It becomes important enough to people that they care about you and care about what you're doing. The way we always had it in mind that Wonga didn't just work in the UK. That if we could create a genuine alternative for consumers that was better than the institutions that they dealt with for decades, that there was an opportunity that worked in lots of countries in the world. And it's not in every single country because just cultures are different and regulatory pieces are different and banking technologies are different. But we're starting to internationalize. We launched in South Africa earlier this year, and that's going very well for us. But we're focusing on that, and we're focusing on new business at the same time. And it's very difficult to grow geographically and expand product at the same time. But nobody signed up for an easy gig. So we want to do both, and we think that we think small businesses are getting as raw a deal as consumers were getting. And I think if you look at a macro trend, small business lending is critical to society. I mean, most employment happens in most developed countries through small business creation and employment. When you look at the regulatory framework that the banks are now under and the scrutiny, they actually can't lend nearly as much to small businesses as they used to. So, for all the dishonesty in the debate politically about why aren't banks lending, and the reality is the regulators have put them in a very, very difficult position by making it very expensive for them to lend to small businesses. Their distribution models are also very manual and not very well suited to very small loans to businesses. But most small businesses fail for cash flow reasons, not for P&L reasons. Mostly they fail because an invoice wasn't paid, something burns down, some kind of extraneous event, or something unexpected that puts a business out of business. And so for us, coming in with the technology that allows us to very quickly make small loans for a short amount of time to businesses is critical. So we lend now up to £25,000 to businesses for up to a year, but they can take £1,000 for a week. That's also fine for us. And it's that flexibility in our system that lets people in £100 increments, in weekly increments next to that, solve those problems is very valuable to the ecosystem. And so we didn't go and duplicate a product that a bank's got. We went into it and said, listen, in this ecosystem, if we think it's important for small businesses to have a source of funding that is short-term and fast for the occasional time they need it, let's go and create that, and that's different. And that's what our interest is, and we think that need exists in many countries. And so we're very excited about it, and we're going to be both growing the product side and the country side at the same countries at the same time.
Just wanted to ask on the team building side, you guys obviously have been very innovative in financial services, and Dave, you were around in the earliest days of PayPal. I'm guessing you didn't hire too many people, and you still don't hire too many people from financial services industry. So, and at Skype it was the same thing about telecoms. What's your advice to people as they're sort of building up their team on the sort of the pros and cons of sort of either working with or hiring sort of industry experts? The temptation is, always, I'm in an advertising business, but if I hire someone from an agency, I'm in a media company, etc.
Yeah,
so
it's a great question. So my strong bias is against doing that. So if you're trying to create another pizza restaurant, you live on a block and there are 4 pizza restaurants and you want to open a 5th one, it's a great idea to go and hire 3 of the guys from other pizza restaurants, and that's cool. If you're trying to do something that's meaningfully different, it doesn't make sense to use people who have been in the incumbent business because that's what people think about. So their norm is what you're trying to disrupt. So I think there are very rare places where one does want to go and get experience. In our case, it was in finance because the way you account for financial services is significantly different with provisioning, etc., and you need to get that right. And so that was one place we said, let's go and do that. But even in places like risk, we didn't take anybody from risk because I thought we could do it much better. And so we've hired almost nobody from financial services, and we've hired far more people from the ecosystem that we all live in, from consumer internet businesses, and that's the culturally where we go. And you know, that's why we've got two people here from Wonga, Joel and Tara. Where's Tara? There's Tara at the back there. And they're two great examples. Joel's just literally joined today. It's his first day at Wonga. So good, welcome, Joel. Yeah, but Tara's a good...
Every day is like this.
Every day is like that, exactly. So, yeah, Tara's a great example of somebody with very different experience and came out of graduate school. And we're just brilliant talent and hard work and just been brilliant in the business. So I think the way we think about it is we hire for talent and for attitude and for and there's a ton of information you can get on Wikipedia and Google today, funnily enough. And so what do you need to learn, you get.
I think Dave's got.
Just kind of a weird question. Did you feel like you identified some point of product market fit in the organization, and did your hiring practices and speed change after that? If not, tell me about it.
We're constantly slowing. So my main struggle is to resist the inertia that comes from size. So there've been bumps. It's not a straight line, but just we're now about 400 people, and so as you get to 400 people, it's just decisions take longer, and there's more process and there's more structure. And what I think of as kind of the founder's role more than anything is to resist the obvious and the kind of and to try and stay as lean and culturally adept as possible.
If maybe the first 20 to 50 hires, if you felt like the company sort of hit stride, and did your hiring practices change as a result of that or not?
I think when we brought it in-house, we got much better at it. So I think which we brought our first recruiter in-house at something like 20 people or something like that. Until then, we recruited just from our network and people we knew. And so, I think at that stage we started becoming much faster at recruiting. I think if once you get that fit, bringing somebody in-house to do recruitment is quite an important thing to do.
Maybe I could elaborate.
Yeah, please.
On the answer, because I often tell other startups about the way Errol hires. Errol hires opportunistically because everybody he meets is a potential wanted person, and he spots talent and he figures out afterwards where that person's going to fit. It's a very unusual way of hiring, and it works.
I've had my eye on Dave for years, actually.
My question is actually related in an extension to that, and I think in your case it might be different because perhaps funding and having access to capital was less of an issue than perhaps for some of the startups. Because I think that when a lot of startups, they hire the best that they can with the money that they've got, and it perhaps comes a point when they do have more money later on, and they have to then start bringing in people above the people that have been at the beginning. Did you have to do that, or did you always hire the number one?
We found it quite easy early on to hire great people who didn't expect huge salaries but got good equity. So we were very generous with the equity, and people made real sacrifices on package and reduced salaries significantly to join to get the equity. But one has to be able to articulate the value in the equity to be able to do that, I think. And that self-qualifies for a certain amount of people. And I think that's culturally important also. I think if you're trying to create an organization where people feel like shareholders at large, you need a strong core team of genuine shareholders who are people who have really sacrificed to be able to get a stake, and where their stakes over time become really significant. And that's important. And so I think we were, for whatever reason, quite fortunate. I think building a business in slow times, which we did, economically was quite helpful. So it wasn't as, we started scaling the team in, we were really scaling in 08, 09. And now, and so the market's been easier in London than it would have been 3 or 4 years before that. So I think when you're getting your first few people, it's worth taking the time to let people self-select effectively. But one has to be generous with equity if one's asking people to make a sacrifice, I think. And where you're not willing to do both of those things, it's really hard to get quality.
I mean, the question is more in the session, I guess, of what Dave was asking. once you kind of got to a certain size, did you bring in people above those that started because suddenly all different skills that were required, or did you, the people that started in the early days scale to run the company that became?
We're doing that at the moment, really. So that happened to us maybe at 300 people or so. Like that didn't happen at 20 or 40 or 50 people. We are fine. We had people that were absolutely capable to do that. I think at 300 or 400 people, just as we started internationalizing and products started evolving, we started doing that. So we brought in, experienced COOs and CFOs, people that came in. But because people were meaningful shareholders in the business and they understood that it made sense, we've had no fallout at all from doing it. I think one has to get the timing right of where that happens. There's no. I wish there was at this stage this happens.
In your exploration process for figuring out if you wanted to work on Wonga, what ideas did you discover?
I've still got them. I'm not sure.
Errol, Dave made a strong case earlier that all attention is good attention. That even if you get negative
in financial services.
Well, no, I thought it would be actually useful for this group to hear you've gotten a lot of press, both positive and negative, obviously, and do you feel that the negative press was as beneficial to your growth and your brand and your presence as the positive?
Look, I think, with press, one has to put yourself in the consumer's position and look at when you're reading the press or when you're consuming press, what are you understanding, what are you consuming, right? So it's one thing to look at as an analyst or as an outsider or as an expert or as a consumer. It just depends on the perspective. So I think, we try to, we care about our reputation like anybody else, and we're doing the right thing by our customers. And so, we've got over 1 million customers and a net promoter score of 78. So we're doing clearly a lot that's right for our customers, and we try, and that net promoter score is going up. And that's what we do as a business. So obviously, where people criticize you, you look at it and you go, I wish they weren't criticizing me. But I think from a practical perspective, most news is good news. I think the relevant, it just it comes with being relevant, and it's part of what you deal with in that space.
I think there's also just like two factors. One is much more important when you're getting started. When you have a large customer base that actually use something to lose occasionally from certain types of negative press. And like I said, in financial services, you just tend to have a higher bar for some types of reporting. But still, all those things aside, I would still say, having gone through 2 or 3 incidents of very negative press, you come out the other side and usually it's just more visibility and more variety.
Well,
look at the legend that is Dave McClure.
You don't go to jail.
Errol, my perception has been that it's actually been good. Like your brand is way more present because there are a few, critics with a loud voice and then people go, Wonga, what is that? And I'm wondering if you had the same perspective. Or
we're very data centric, so we actually track that.
But did sales go up when people started giving you negative reporting?
Absolutely.
But I think the key point is that if you've got customers who are happy, and if you measure things like a net promoter score, and I don't know when the last time the bank, I actually think First Direct about 10 years ago used to use, more recommended than any other bank, or the most recommended.
And they still are actually.
And that's how they branded and sold themselves. No other financial institution has had the guts to even talk about their net promoter scores.
Yeah, no. I mean, the average of the UK banks that we track is 0, and the average, and there are 2 that are positive significantly. First Direct in the 40s and Co-op in the 20s. So it dramatically slants it, but the average of all of those are about 0.
So we've got time.
So I think that just on the reputational stuff, we take it seriously. So we try to engage as honestly as we can. If you look at Open Wonga, it's quite interesting. I mean, we're really forthright in how we engage and talk and take part in the conversation. And but it's a democracy, and people have particular views, and we're okay with that. That's part of the reason we live in democracies.
Wonga is not the first company you've founded, and so as rewinding back to when you were a first-time CEO and you didn't know everything you know now, what would you say to us as budding entrepreneurs, CEOs in the making, something that you know now and you wish you knew then?
Two things, I think. I'd say look for a big white space and focus on really big stuff. And if it's not, if you really be honest with yourselves, if it's not big, figure out how it could become big. And the second thing is trust yourself a lot. So you'll have certain ways of doing things, and if you didn't, you wouldn't have got to this point, quite frankly. So you've got a certain energy and a certain ability to do things in the world, and a certain way of doing things and communicating and being, and a set of values. And I'd say just be authentic and honest to those things. And I think too often one comes into an environment, these kind of environments or startup environments, and they're intimidating environments for anybody, including especially first-time entrepreneurs, where you're bringing in people around you who are more experienced than you. But the best businesses, if you think back to some of those very strong founder-run businesses, the best businesses have got very strong personalities who are honest to themselves.
All right, I think that's a
Great.
good closing remark. Thank you so much, Errol.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.